Hey, welcome back. I'm Roger. I'm a welding and fabrication instructor for the Center for Employment Training in San Diego, California. This is our second video, and what we're going to do today is show you how to open up, operate, and set our cutting torch here. And then we're going to be showing you the differences between a carburizing, an oxidizing, and a neutral flame. Okay? And all of the setup to go with it. All right. So I want to introduce you to a young man that we call Big Happy. All right. He's one of our students here at CET, and he's going to come in. I'm going to introduce him to the machine and see what we can do to show him exactly how to set it up and run it safely and correctly. Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Big Happy. The reason they call me Big Happy is because I'm always happy. I'm happy to be here with Roger Purebred, and I'm ready to learn.
All right. Well, Happy, what is it about the rig here that you have any questions about?
So I want to know how can I properly set my regulator on? Tell me about it. I'm confused. How does everything work?
Well, it's just like everything else. If you notice through all of our welding, we've got the same type of theme throughout everything. You've got to have your settings correctly. So even though this has nothing to do with any type of an electrical arc, you still got to have your heat settings right.
Okay.
Which means we have to have our gas regulated, everything in the right order, or we're not going to get the right effects that we want out of your cutting rig, or if you decide to weld with it. So it's very important to set them up right.
Yes, sir. So where would you like me to set it at?
All right, that's a really great question. You know, the settings on your machine, they're always going to be dictated by whatever material you're cutting or whatever size tip we're working with. Now, a lot of tips in the old days, they were just marked. They had 101, all depending on different sizes. And you buy them accordingly to what size cutting rig you may have on your rig itself, the cutting torch. Some are bigger, some are smaller. But what I highly recommend is looking up the parameters of these particular tips as you're going along. Some of them nowadays are marked right on their force as far as what their capacity is. What's that one say?
So the capacity on this one says 102 capacity.
And if we look at the bottom, I think we have a 5/8.
And we have a 5/8 capacity. And we have 10 to 15 millimeters.
All right. So this is going to cut about 5/8 thick material. And then we're going to set it up accordingly toward how much this tip is calling for as far as acetylene and oxygen. You got any questions first about the gases themselves?
The gases themselves, where can I find out what type of gases it is?
Well, you know, the gas is always going to be labeled. Okay, if you ever have a bottle, of course, your bottles are going to have labels on them. So pay close attention to what the labels are. If you ever get a bottle that has no label on it, put it aside. Don't even take a chance at anything using it at all. Just put it away and contact your supplier, and they'll take care of it.
So I see right next to it, there's a acetylene salt. What is that? Where does it come from? How does it work?
That's a great question. Okay, acetylene comes from a mineral called calcium carbide. Okay, the calcium carbide is milled right out of the earth. Wow. All right. Now, when this calcium carbide is combined with a liquid, like water or acetone, something along those lines, then it's going to create a chemical reaction and it makes a gas, an acetylene gas.
Wow. I
I just so happen to have some carbide over here if you'd like a little demonstration.
Yes, sir.
Right here, Big Happy, we got some calcium carbide. Ordered this over the internet. When I was a child, you could buy this right across the counter from Ace Hardware. I highly recommend be careful with this. It's a wonder we didn't blow our hands off. Smell that, and you can see, you can tell by the smell that it's definitely got something to do with acetylene gas. Now, inside the bottle itself, this calcium carbide is mixed with acetone. Okay? The acetone reacts on the carbide, and then it will combine. Now, when the acetone evaporates, that's what releases your acetylene gas.
Wow.
I'm going to show you the reaction right here. First, I've got some water.
Water.
Okay? So this is just water alone. Put a little water in here. Get a few granules of our calcium carbide. Let's drop it in there and let it work a little bit. Don't do this at home, all right? I'm an untrained professional. Here we go.
Wow. Just
So
with a little bit of water.
Just a little bit of water, you can see how it's giving off a flammable gas from a rock, from a mineral. It's really incredible. So that's the part that really amazes me about how the gas is generated. In the old days, we could not buy gas that was the acetylene already pre-bottled. So they had acetylene generators. But thank goodness nowadays we can go ahead and just buy it pre-bottled. It's a lot easier. Alright, so just like we said a while ago though, this happens to be saturated with acetone. Okay? I just so happen to have a little bit of acetone. Now, don't ever have this outside in your welding area. I highly recommend that you don't, okay? Because, well, why? It's flammable, extremely flammable. Acetone can
Make a big change, huh?
it can actually make a big explosion. So you have to be careful. If you have any residuals spilled, whichever, okay? Now, I'm going to drop a few granules of the calcium carbide.
How much calcium should we put in there?
How much?
What do you recommend?
You know, we don't want to have very big of a reaction right now because we're just doing an illustration. So I'm just going to put in a few granules. You know, but when they manufacture it, I'm sure they probably buy this stuff by the time. All right. So let's stand back and see what kind of reaction we're going to get out of the acetone. Okay. So if you notice, you can barely see that reaction happening. It's a much more stabilized release of calcium carbide. The more you add, of course, then the flame is going to become higher and higher. But it's a released effect of the acetylene gas, as you can see. Now this is just going to sit here and evaporate slowly as the calcium carbide dissipates. All right. Now, for safety reasons, let's go ahead and snuff our fire out because it would actually burn for a while. But like I said, don't do this at home. It can be quite dangerous. But that's where acetylene comes from. Inside of our tank is a sponge-like medium. So this carbide-soaked acetone goes inside of here as a liquid and put in under high pressure.
Wow.
Okay? Now, when it's under high pressure at that point, we can then, when we release it, it's going to cause a chemical reaction so that it turns from a liquid into a gas. All right? But that has to be done at the right time. So if we don't have that chemical reaction at the right time, then we could have some really bad adverse effects. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Any questions right now before we start setting up the regulator and showing you how to strike a flame?
So what's the proper way to turn on the gases for the acetylene and for the oxygen? How would I turn them on?
Okay, that's a great question. All right. A lot of people, okay, approach these rigs, this cutting rig, with a little bit of a nonchalant attitude. We want to make sure that we approach these with a lot of respect because this piece of equipment can do a lot of bodily damage. All right. So always assume that these bottles are completely full. Always with a full charge. This happens to be a 300 cubic inch bottle. If this one here is completely full, you're going to have over 2,000 pounds of pressure in what we call a 300. Now, with that being said, we have no idea where the regulator is set at, any of that. It may be wide open. We have no clue who left it this way. Now, with that being said, remember, we've talked before in class, anything man-made can break, right?
Yes, sir.
So what I'd like for you to do is I want you to grab the valve here on top, and then I'd like for you to turn away from where your valve is, and then slowly crack it.
Do I want to crack it all the way?
No, I slowly give it a slow crack and about a half turn. Okay, good. Now we have slowly released the pressure, and it's coming to our regulator. Right now we see that we've got about 1,500 pounds of pressure, and we're not regulating anything out for working pressure. Now we can go ahead and set up our cutting torch. Now,
Yes, sir.
like we said before, with the different size tips, we've got to have our equipment set at the right amount of PSI. If you don't have the right amount of oxygen, then you're not going to have the right amount of heat. It takes the right amount of combination of these two gases to perform a cut effectively. All right? Look up your parameters. So on this one here, this tip, it runs best at about 6 PSI. So let's go ahead and grab your torch. All right? And we're going to set our regulator at about 6 PSI.
6 PSI.
Pounds per square inch.
Yes,
All
sir.
right? So now to do so, the gas has to be flowing. We can regulate a certain temperature, pressure, I want to say, and if we see really closely, this needle will go up, all right? But it doesn't go down. It doesn't relieve the pressure. We have to be careful when we adjust this without any flow being on. You're not going to get anything accurate. So if we wanted to adjust the oxygen, turn on your oxygen valve, okay? This one will activate and turn the oxygen on, and so will this one. So, to strike this, first off, let's turn this one on and leave it on, okay?
Yes, sir.
So do that. Now, we can crack this one open, and then we can set our gas to the appropriate level we need, right about 6 PSI.
6 PSI.
Okay? So now you're going to turn that on, and you're going to come over here, come around this side for me. Very good. Now we can go ahead and turn that until it reads 6 PSI on your working pressure.
What's that noise I hear?
Okay, you're hearing some escaped gas. It's just getting more and more strong as we go on. So you want to do this procedure very quickly, and as soon as you get it set, turn your gas off. Because oxygen enhances a fire, so pretty good probability or possibility that we could catch something on fire if we have a lot of oxygen floating around. So set it quickly as far as the PSI goes. Now this is a double seat valve, all right? That means that when it's all the way closed, it's seated. There's no way it's going to seep out or lose any gas. But if we barely open it, it's going to have the probability of losing a little bit around this valve. So if we're going to be working all day long making a cut, open it all the way up. But now, if we're not, just give it a couple of turns so that you can turn it off fairly quickly. Remember, your boss wants you to perform your task as safely, but as quickly as you can, so that we can get some production done. All right, so that's opening up the oxygen and setting that pressure. All right?
Yes, sir.
All right. One thing I want to bring to your attention is that on these bottles, on the regulators, that the dial closer to the valve is going to be your bottle pressure, and the dial closer to the outlet is going to be your working pressure, how much we're laying out the end of our torch. And we have an overflow valve right here. So if it did happen to get overflowed, something happened, it would release extra pressure here, hopefully without this blowing up in our face. Then, right here we have what we call a flash arrestor.
Flash arrestor.
Yeah, and just like in our first video, the flash arrestor could be either here or right here on your torch. Okay? So that pretty much covers everything about the oxygen, and we've got that set.
Yes, sir.
Okay? And you shut your valves off on your torch. Is that
Yes,
right?
sir.
Okay. Now, we need another gas, don't we? So, what's next?
So I want to know, where do I set my gas on the acetylene?
Okay? So, on the acetylene, you're going to be looking it up and see where we're going to be at. A while ago, I was talking about pressure. I didn't indicate enough pressure actually on gas. I was confused for a second, and I had acetylene in my mind. So what we want to do now, because the instructor gave you some information that was a little bit off, let's set this on about 35
35
PSI.
PSI.
All right, so let's go ahead and turn your valves on.
I did a mistake. Let's go back.
There you go. Good thing we can edit.
Yes, sir.
And now we're going to regulate to about 35 PSI.
35 PSI it is.
All right, very good. Now, Let's go ahead and shut our valves off here. That way the gas is no longer flowing. And now we're going to get to setting the pressure on our acetylene. Okay, so just like we mentioned once before, we can't set any pressure unless it is what?
Decompressed.
Or flowing.
Flow.
Yes, so the gas has got to be flowing through the regulator before we can accurately set it on the dial. So we know from looking up the tip, it's going to be about 6 psi on your acetylene.
Yes, sir.
So let's take it on to about 6.
Turn around. Turn on my acetylene.
Now, you'd asked me about the oxygen, but we didn't mention about the acetylene. There's something special about the acetylene I want to make sure that we drive home to everybody here on YouTube, because this one here is the gas we've got to really respect also. When you are working professionally, all right, I want you to be able to turn this bottle on slowly, of course, but only crack it about half a turn. Just enough so that the pressure valve will read. We do that for safety's sake. That way, if we do have a problem, if our regulator fails, if we have a fire, anything that happens, don't run away, just run over here and kill the gas, and that will take care of the problem. Okay? That's a hard thing to remember, though.
How long does it take for it to catch on fire?
It could almost be immediate. It would be practically immediate. So that's why we really have to inspect everything about our equipment. Okay? And whenever we are performing any work, I highly recommend that you do a drop test on your bottles prior to using them.
How would I do a drop test?
That just means that we're going to close all the valves on our torch, and then we're going to close the bottle itself. If we see any variance or dropping in the volume right here on this dial, that means we're losing gas somewhere through the system, either through our hoses or through our connections. So let's close this off and see if it's going to drop any. And as you see right now, it's not dropping a bit. So we've got a really nice, good, tight connection everywhere. No leaks, nothing going on that's going to cause any problem. Now, we've learned about the acetylene, half turn, so we can turn it off quickly. And believe me, their situation could arise very easily that a fire could happen. We've got to have the soundness of mind to turn this off quick. We've actually seen that happen.
Yes, sir. We have.
Yes, we have. So, another thing I want to talk to you about and make sure that we understand, the acetylene, we want to make sure that when you're regulating your pressure, don't let somebody come along and change it. Don't bump into it. But notice that you have a red zone right here on your outlet pressure. At 15 psi, this acetylene gas reacts differently. Okay?
How so?
Well, at the same time, when it's under high pressure, it's not changing from a liquid to a gas soon enough. So we could actually have some liquid acetylene going down inside of our hoses. All right? So there's very dangerous situation where all of this could not be making a chemical reaction soon enough and really causes problems. So it's always best that it becomes highly unstable at 15, and there's really no reason to get that high. But just like everything else, always inspect your machinery before you get into using it.
Yes, sir.
All right. So that kind of covers a lot about the bottles, how to set it up, all of the above. All right?
Yes, sir.
One thing we didn't mention is that not only can we cut with this rig, but we can also weld with it.
Wow.
Okay? A lot of people don't think about, or it's not taught much anymore in the welding schools, that oxy acetylene is one of the oldest welding processes we have. And a lot of people do it and do it incorrectly.
How old is the acetylene? Oxy acetylene part?
The oxy acetylene process itself has been around since the early 1900s.
Wow.
So you're looking at a process that's close to about 100 years old.
I wasn't even born yet.
Me neither. All right. But one thing I want to remind you of too, just like we talked about the tip, being different sizes, and you have to set your gases accordingly. Okay, your acetylene and your oxygen. Same thing with your tip. You could have tips from 000 to 5, 6, whatever. And that's the diameter of your welding kit, or the end opening right there. The orifice, it's called. Now, when you're welding with this, we have to have it set correctly. So look up your parameters on the internet or from your manufacturer like Victor. So they will tell you exactly where to set your acetylene and your oxygen. That way you can weld effectively.
Thank you. I didn't know that.
Really good thing to know. All right. Any other questions before we get into talking about how to set up the torch?
So earlier, I did a mistake while I turned on the valve. I didn't ask how much do I turn it, so I just turn it just a bit or a lot as the oxygen.
Okay, the oxygen, like I said, we're going to open it all the way up if we're going to be working all day long. So we're going to have a double seat valve. So we've got that bad boy open all the way up, and of course our acetylene just half a turn. So that's half a turn for safety's sake, and now we're good to go. Our rig is set up, we've got the right pressures, and now we are as safe as we can be to strike a flame. Okay? Now, if you hold on to that for me, that's a striker. Wow. They come in a lot of different variable sizes, shapes. One thing about it is the end is replaceable. You have a replaceable flint just right here. It'll screw on and off. And that way when it wears out, you can always have a brand new one. Some of these come with 2 and 3 flints on the head alone, but you always just put down a little pressure on the one side, bring it to you, and it will strike. Okay? Easy enough. Now, your cutting rig itself. This whole cutting torch is made out of brass. Did you know it's brass?
Wow.
Okay? And there's a special reason that we use brass.
Why is that?
Well, brass just happens to be one of the few types of metals that we have that doesn't spark.
Whoa.
Okay? So right now we're in welding school, and you're eventually going to probably learn through the school of hard knocks that sometimes you might have to work in a factory that's got a lot of explosive products to it. If that's the case, then you might even have to work with brass tools. Brass hammers, brass wrenches, all of the above, just so we don't have a spark.
Wow.
Because some places, one spark, and we can really hurt a lot of people. One thing you want to keep in mind is always keep your torch hand tight. Brass is very, very soft, and there's no reason to crank these down with a lot of torque or pressure. If you notice, this has got a really nice square hex nut right here, and we're going to get a nice opened-end adjustable wrench. And here, okay, you never use a wrench. Those are going to always hand tighten. Now with that being said, that's how quickly we can change out different cutting chips or welding tips, or if you have a rosebud that will do a lot of heating for heating up. All right. That talks about all of the torch in itself. Now, any questions before we start lighting it up?
Yes, so you're able to twist that off just with your hands?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, if it just so happens that you may have a leak, all right, just give it a little extra twist.
Okay.
Okay? And always inspect these threads if you happen to have this apart. Don't leave this laying around without a head on it either. It can easily be dropped on the floor. And with that being said, this torch right here, just to have it redone, could easily cost you a couple $100 to rebuild it, depending on the size, of course. So you wouldn't want to mess up any of these threads. And they're all a compression fit with the right O-rings on it. So inspect your equipment too about every year or so and make sure that your equipment's in good running shape. If you happen to have a leak here at this connection, don't drop it and run. It's not going to explode and blow up on you. Keep a calm, cool head and just tighten up that little area just like so.
Wow.
Okay? You may even have a little leak around the tip. If that's the case, just tighten it up and you'll be fine. All right? So, if that covers your questions, let's fire it up.
Sounds good.
All right. So now, you've got the striker. What I'd like for you to do is let's get our appropriate PPE. All right, Ismail, let's go ahead and fire up this machine here, this nice little torch. So, first thing, let's open up your oxygen, the valve on the right. Open it up and just leave it open.
Yes, sir.
That's good. Perfect right there. All right, now, let's go ahead and you're ready to strike your acetylene. So before you open it, always have your striker in hand.
Thank you.
So let's put our hand over here. Put this in your right hand. Have that in your left. Simultaneously, hold on to it. Open this just a little bit. Come up and strike.
Yes, sir.
We don't want to be dumping a lot of acetylene into our work atmosphere.
When I point this, do I point this down?
Always point it away from your body, of course, and make sure you don't have anybody close around to you.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna look around. There's no one here.
Yeah,
Right here.
Exactly.
So I point behind it.
Always get behind it like that. Okay.
Wow.
All right. So now you've noticed it's giving off a lot of black smoke. Okay. First off, you want to stay out of that smoke, and you want to make sure you don't do that for a very long time. So let's add a little oxygen first so that it'll quit smoking. Your friends there in the shop won't think it's very funny getting black soot all over them. I'm going to introduce ourselves in a bit. A regulator of oxygen supply. Okay, so now that we've opened it, and we're going to adjust our acetylene. So we're going to close off our oxygen here, open our acetylene up, and you notice it's got a nice bulbous end to it. Okay, and we call that a horse's tail.
It does look like a horse tail.
It does. And now we're going to add a little oxygen, okay, to the mix. Now, slowly as we're adding, you can see that we have a nice cone on the interior. Okay. Back this off a little bit more and show you. See this big interior cone right there? That's a telltale sign that it's carbide inflamed. So every textbook will tell you, one big inner cone is carbide. Yep. Now we want to go to a neutral cone.
Yes, sir.
So it's a one-to-one mix, basically, of acetylene and oxygen to get the proper cut. Now you're going to have 6 small little cones known as preheat cones, preheaters. So adjust the oxygen here down until it comes to a nice. 6 nice individual cones. Our whole goal is we want to make those very nice and smooth on the outside. Okay? So I would like for you to adjust this to where they are very nice and smooth. So right there, they're a little fuzzy. Okay, now let's smooth them up and see what we got. Okay. Now you notice it got louder, didn't it? Yes, it is. Alright. And I don't know how well we can see on the camera, but our preheat cones got very, very faded and loud and long. Okay? So that's oxidizing. So now let's start our oxygen. A little less oxygen and more one-to-one. It'll flatten up and it'll brighten up a little bit. Just like so. But now, at this point, looks like we got it pretty close. We can cool our setting there right here. And this will introduce air to the center of the tip, and that's what moves all the molten material out of the setting line at first. But the preheat cone should stay all uniform when we pull that trigger. Let's see what happens. Oh, you can notice they're not, are they? They're not. And now, let's leave that cool, and now we can adjust here and bring those down nice and smooth. That's a little faded. There we go. Now, that looks very nice. See how we got a nice line right down here. Yes, sir. Okay. Now, let's go ahead. We turn it off right now. So there's always a talk about which one to turn off first. Acetylene or oxygen. Alright, so I'm big on turning off the fuel first. Kill that acetylene, kill the oxygen.
Wow.
Alright, I always like to kill the oxygen last because the acetylene could be still on. Anything could happen, but get rid of that fuel gas quickly. That's my motto.
So there's people that turn off the oxygen first instead of the acetylene. Why is that?
Well, it's just throughout the years, it's been one of those things where people have difference of opinions on which one to shut off first.
Yes, sir.
The only thing that we really have to remember is that when you do shut it down, there is a probability that we can get what we call a flashback.
Wow.
Okay? A flashback is when the fire actually flashes back into your either a rosebud heating tip or your cutting torch. And it will actually be on fire inside the chamber here. Okay? It's actually flashed and fired, and it's melting on the inside. At the same time, it's calling for oxygen to feed that fire inside of here. And the only way we can tell we got a backflash is with a really loud whistle.
Wow.
If you hear it whistling like that, shut it off really quickly. Introduce gas so it'll fire back open, or go over and kill your bottles. Either one will stop the backflash, all right?
Yes,
but
sir.
just always a good practice. Anything happen, kill your gases. That's always a good practice. All right, now let's open this up, set it up, and we're going to make a cut.
Sounds great.
All right, cut your torch for me. What do you think? A little bit up. Looks like you're about there, huh? Not bad. All right. Now, what you're going to want to do is situate your material so that you're comfortable, okay? As much as you can be for the situation that you're in. Now, a lot of people will take their torch and they will hold it with both hands, of course, using your non-dominant hand as a guide and your dominant hand to activate with. So use this left elbow as a pivot and come in, and then we'll be able to hold our torch at a right direct angle.
Do I preheat on my material?
You will, but let's get into position first and I'll show you exactly how we're going to do that. Yes, sir. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and drop our lens. Drop the PVD. There you go. Now, get the preheat cones down there close to the material. At the same time, you'll be noticing the material's going to turn red. Once it turns red, then you are going to hit your air right here so it will cut. Your cutting air. This way, okay, at that point, you're going to steadily move in the direction of your cut. Keeping these preheat cones 1/8 to 3/8 off the surface. Okay. Very nice. All right, let's stop right there for a second, Happy. So, let's kill our torch for a second. All right. What a lot of people don't understand is when we're making an oxyacetylene cut, that what we're doing is an oxidation process. Oxidation is just another good word for rust, isn't it? It's rusting away. Oxide, okay? This is oxide on steroids. Now, we've learned from our book that the oxide layer has how many times the melting point of regular steel? It's 4 times.
4 times?
4 times. So that oxide layer, the stuff that makes your steel black, is 4 times the heating point of your regular steel. So once we're through that oxide layer, we're so hot that we cannot control the cut. Now, a lot of times a person will be making a cut either in the shop or the field. They've gotten so far and they had to stop. Or it wasn't set right and it wasn't cutting correctly. Well, at that point, a lot of people will go ahead and come on in and cut in the same exact spot and try to start right where they left off. With that,
what do you recommend to start at?
well, I would recommend let's starting back out of your line, okay? So the part that we're going to be calling our drop, this part here, we could actually start back over here and then move into the line to where we want to cut and then take back off. Okay? So let's fire our torch back up and start our cut again.
Yes, sir.
Very nice job. Excellent. Okay? So, restart the cut. Come on into your hole right here. Okay? Now start this cut right on the back side of the hole and then work forward. Go back up to where we were. Right here in the hole and then come my way. There you go. And that's the appropriate way to start and stop. Okay? Very nicely done. And then, of course, the more you practice, the better your edge is going to be when you cut. You're going to get smoother and more accurate every time. All right, so that's basically all the workings of an Oxy Acetylene torch. You got any questions maybe we didn't cover?
You guys are amazing. You guys showed me the proper way of how to use a proper acetylene cutting torch. I learned the basics of how to properly held my cutting torch, how to cut, how to manipulate my angle, how to cut that. Also, you did an amazing job.
You did all the work. All I did was run my mouth. But anyway, stay tuned next time. We're going to have another video coming up on how to properly run your shielded metal arc welding. We're going to start electrode stick welding coming up next. So please stay tuned for another video. Please subscribe and like. We'll see you next time. And remember, if you ain't burning, you ain't learning.
One like the sand.